back to Hoffman Reproductions. Ben Hoffman here. Thank you for tuning in with us again here today. So the term bushcrafting is something that has gotten immensely popular the last 5-10 years, and essentially what it is, if you're not familiar with it, it's taking out primitive, more traditional tools, I guess you could say, knife, hatchet, other equipment, into the forest and practicing some of these skills that we might call primitive, but actually are still quite effective. And it's somewhat amusing how things tend to repeat. What we might call traditional primitive survival training, our ancestors in the 18th century, they just called that everyday life. They didn't know anything else. They were very proficient at it. So things such as fire making with flint and steel, that's part of bushcrafting generally nowadays, and that was done every day and was a common practice in the 18th century, and it's sort of a rediscovered skill. So one thing that all bushcrafters, if you will, have in common, they all carry a belt knife of some type. Belt knives, modern style bushcraft belt knives, they tend to be heavy and thick, sort of, you know, a do-all kind of a thing. They actually had a knife in the 18th century that you might call the original bushcraft type knife, and the reason you might call it that is because it was such a common knife. So occasionally we get asked through my business, what would be generally the most common type of belt knife to be carried by a native woodland warrior, used in the village, colonial homestead, soldier, long hunter, combination of any of those things. And without a doubt, that would be what we call the English trade knife. Now, in historic records, you won't see it referenced as a trade knife. That's kind of a modern name we've given it. However, it's generally listed as a scalping or butcher knife. There's a little bit of debate on whether or not that's talking about the same kind of knife or one that is slightly different. The debate will probably continue, but one thing is for sure, the English variety, and probably the French a close second, were very heavily traded here in North America during the 1700s. They're found occasionally at Indian village sites, fort sites, trading outpost sites, and we know without a doubt these were here in the American colonies by the tens of thousands, perhaps millions, and without a doubt that would be the most common style of knife that was carried. Now, we've done other videos on trade knives and gone into detail on them, so I won't go as heavy a detail as we have. You can go back and check those out. I also have a video on making one of these if you're interested in that. They're early videos, so the audio and the recording may be a little crude, but the information is good. But just nutshell version, there are a lot of companies nowadays that have sort of a generic English or French trade knife, but those things, as far as the knives, the way they were constructed, it's very specific to make one that is historically correct. For the English variety, size-wise, they came in roughly a 5, 6, and 7-inch model. Those were the basic sizes. Half tang, meaning the tang didn't go all the way to the end, generally on the English, half tang. The English almost always have an upsweep to them for the mid-18th century. 3 iron pins, small iron pins, and very lightweight. The thickness on the spine of this knife, this particular one, is 3/32 of an inch. English original trade knives, or scalping butcher knives if you will, the spines are always thin, 1/16 of an inch to 3/32. Not great big heavy giant beasts of a knife. Some modern bushcrafters might frown on that because they like to do the thing, you know, where you take it, put it on the log, and bash on it, batoning. I'm not a fan of doing that, but a small to mid-sized knife paired up with, if I can get it out here, a well-made hatchet or tomahawk, and there's very little that you encounter in the forest as far as bushcrafting or survival that you can't take care of. But this combination, pretty hard to beat in the woods. Handle materials on them from the factory tended to be beech, boxwood or South American hardwoods, various kinds. This particular one I made of elm. Kind of went with the idea that perhaps this knife lost its handle and was rehandled here in the colonies. But that's the typical type of woods that were used on them originally. The next question that we get a lot is, what would this type of knife have been used for? A lot of people see it and it kind of reminds them of a kitchen knife, and they figure that's what they would have been used for. Originally what they were used for, everything, and I mean everything. A knife like this, I'm sure several of them would have been present at a colonial homestead. Food preparation, cutting up your vegetables, meat for the family's dinner. Yes, absolutely, these were used very heavily for that purpose. Also out in the woods were they used? Absolutely. This would make a phenomenal patch knife. When you're taking and loading the rifle and you're putting the round ball down there to take up the space, you need a cloth patch, a section of cloth. This would cut that off very nice. That'd do an excellent job at that. Also, for field dressing game, this type of knife works excellent. I'm not a hunter, but I've sold a lot of these to deer hunters, and I've been told these are phenomenal at field dressing and skinning deer. The thin blade, the upward sweep to them allows you to get right in there, and being a thin blade, they're very easy to sharpen. So if you need to touch the edge up while you're working on a critter, I've been told they work great for that. Cleaning fish, no problem there, that'd work great. And also fighting. Even though this knife does not have a guard on it, it's not extremely robust. A lot of period descriptions of Indians and frontiersmen always talk about there being a tomahawk or belt axe, and then on the opposite side a scalping knife. And so for fighting, yeah, you know, you could whip that out and that would do a job on your enemy. Also, although it's somewhat morbid, the term that these were called scalping knives, yes, indeed, these probably, we know, lifted a lot of hair in the 18th century when scalping was commonplace on both the Indian side and the white side. These would have lifted a lot of hair. So a little bit different than the type of bushcraft knife you might see today, but in their time, this most likely would be what you would see. There were other knives, of course, available in the 18th century and were used, but this probably holds first place for the most common. And still, a very usable knife today. We sell a lot of these to reenactors that take them and just carry them or display them, but an equal number of individuals buy them and actually take them out in the field, in the woods, and put them to use, and we've got good reports on them. So if you're interested in this knife, a little more information on it, we do have it listed on our website. It has since sold, but if you go to hoffmanreproductions.com, you can see this knife in a little bit more detail on it. And interesting subject back then and today as well. So that's going to do it for this time around. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a very Merry Christmas, or if you're viewing this video after the fact, I hope you had a Merry Christmas and a good New Year. We'll see you all again next time. Bye now.